Welcome to the RTD Group Thinkers podcast, the podcast for nonprofit marketers. This is a show about, I would normally say, the people who influence nonprofit marketing and fundraising. It is. It is also today, very especially, a show about people of influence and people of creativity. So, unlike other podcasts that talk about the craft of fundraising, we focus on people and pioneers and thinkers. And in this case, we're focusing on and talking to someone who demonstrates soul more than I think many folks that we have come across. Ronnie, tell us a little bit about our guest today.
Our guest is Brad Montague. He's a New York Times bestselling author, speaker, illustrator, probably best known for being the writer and the director of the viral web series Kid President. But he's so much more than that. Like, he calls himself a stubborn optimist, and he just has this infectious positivity about him, I find. And it was really a thrill. He spoke at our event back in May, the Shift, and I was blown away by what he presented. And you'll hear in this interview he talks about how he was kind of blown away just being around a group of purpose-minded nonprofit professionals and the takeaways that he had from being there. So just a really great guy. It's all is what I can say.
I on the spot at our event, as I was introducing Brad to the stage, I told the audience that for me, he is akin to Mr. Rogers. And the more that I have gotten to know Brad, every bit of that is true.
Totally.
And so that's something that I think is unique about um, this conversation that you're going to hear and that you're going to see, and something that I've taken away from our conversation today and the time that we've had to spend around Brad is the reality that all of us work in creativity. We may not all be creative professionals by like function, but especially for those of us that work in nonprofit marketing and fundraising and organizations that support that activity, we work in creativity, and you might be surprised um, where Brad's North Star comes from and how he maintains that balance of creativity and storytelling and wonder that he puts out in the world. So it's a joy of a conversation and journey that you're going to go on through this episode. So I'll stop yapping so that we can get to it. Without further ado, here's Brad Montague of Montague Workshop on the Arcady Group Thinkers podcast. So, Brad, my first question for you is where did you come from? And I don't mean like where did you grow up? I mean, and you actually had little Brad up on screen.
Yeah.
Um, but like, tell us about little Brad. Tell us about like where, give us a little bit of your origin story. And then I want us to get into like how did we get from little Brad to big little Brad, which is the Brad that we know today.
This is like a big question. Like the where did you come from? I immediately think of Cotton Eye Joe, and I'm thinking,
I
where
did
am I
too, actually.
going and what's happening, and there's a lot to unpack with that song. And, and then when you think origin story too, I wish I could tell you I was bit by a radioactive spider or there was some epic journey, but my story is one of the epic thing of being alive, being a person, and learning to be that still. I grew up in a small town in West Tennessee on a farm around nature and felt like a little alien because I was a creative kid and my family's creative, but in completely different ways, and so I was an inside kid. I like to draw and dream and feel big feelings. and, and they were like, we don't know what to do with you. And so I did have a handful of really great adults in my life that I look to as, oh, that's how you celebrate the weird, unique qualities of the kids around you, and help them feel seen. And that stuck with me. So as I grew, I had tried on many hats of working in many different spaces. I changed my major maybe 15 times in college until I landed in media arts and film. But even after that, I worked in news, I've worked in advertising, I've worked in higher education, I've worked in so many different spaces, but each one was going, this isn't quite right. And then when I started thinking back to being a child and the way those great adults in my life made me feel, I suddenly had a North Star. Oh, I want to do that. I don't know what that looks like, but I want to do that. And so I'm still kind of asking that question. How can I do that? Be what I had when I was a kid, and also being what I didn't have. And kind of that leads to some not boring places.
Was there something that, like an event that happened or something that brought that aha moment to you, or did it just sort of occur naturally as you were doing things and not feeling the right fit? How did that come about?
Well, yeah, I worked in news where you're given, stories to tell. So they'd be like, all right, hey kid, get the camera, go out there and film. And it would be a car accident, it would be a protest, it would be some break-in. And then I show up after the fact with the camera, and I would just, capture the artifacts of whatever happened. And okay, here we are. And I got so like stuck in getting great shots, and I got pretty good at it, like just capturing the story I was told to tell, and then showing back up to the studio, and then cutting it together into a thing that would appear on the news. And I realized one day when I was filming, there was a car accident that had happened, and I got this beautiful shot of shattered glass. And I noticed in the edit room, just like kind of bokeh out in the back, and this blur was this human crying. And I didn't even notice that person crying when I was doing the shot. And I couldn't in good conscience put that in the story. And it hit me that like I was so focused on telling the story I was being assigned to tell, that I missed out on this person having the worst day of their life, and I just captured it coldly. And so I went, I'm not going to do that again. And so I moved into advertising, which was then, oh no, now I'm still telling other people's stories and I'm doing
Yeah.
this, but trying to find the humanity in that and bring
Mm.
humanity into that and do storytelling, not just story selling, and really connect with people and the humanity of it. And through that, I started realizing I was so drawn to the stories we're told when we're kids and the stories that we share to children. And the more I did that, the more I started actually listening to children. And that has changed everything. And that's now the habit of actually listening more than I'm telling a story.
One of the areas where your story starts to get wider, not that knowing you as much as we know you now, that's not your goal and that's not your intent. Kindness is largely what your calling looks like. But your story got wider as Kid President took off. And can you tell us about how Kid President came to be, like where that idea came from, and then at some point, how did you navigate the rapid growing popularity of that creative
Mhm.
platform?
That's a good question. There was this quote I had written down on the front of one of my notebooks in high school, and it was from Andy Kaufman, the comedian, performance artist, Lockdown Taxi. And he said in an interview one time, "Your world is as big as you make it." And that like was just such a cool idea to me, because I grew up small town, one stoplight. the road I grew up on, it's a dead end road. Like it's just kind of, and to hear those words, wait, you could make your world big. Like you could, and so that to my imagination was like, I want to create things and create a big world around what I do. I didn't quite know what that would look like. And as I was working and kind of finding my voice and creating short videos online, creating commercials, directing little pieces here and there, um, was happy with that. But I constantly was in these ideas brewing. I want to do this. I want to make this happen. I want to do this. I had a really great friend named Jeff Schinnebarger who works in social impact space. Brilliant mind. He's one of those equal parts dreamer and doer. And he heard me over and over say, oh, I got this idea. Oh, I want to do this. Oh, I got this idea. And one time he just said to me, you have all these ideas. We're just waiting on you to actually do one of them. And that was, oh, it hurt, in that time, in that moment. But it was this heavy truth I needed, that like I had just been dreaming up this big world, but not actually doing it. So Kid President grew out of that desire. And at the same time I was wanting to do more that brought a childlikeness to my work and to the world. And so as I started doing that project, the idea was not just to like have the idea, but to stick with it for a while. So it was the summer, and Robbie, who played the part of Kid President, is one of my favorite people on the earth. And I loved spending time with him. And I asked if he wanted to be part of this thing. He could pretend to be president of the world. And what would you do or say to the world? And he did what awesome kids do. He just immediately joyfully danced behind this fake desk. And my habit then was to not just have an idea, but stick with it. So every week I posted a new video, and they were short. They were just joyful little bursts. We called them a hand grenade of happiness onto the internet, just lobbing it out into the internet. And there was no, map or no master strategy for we're going to build this empire and do. It was just not every week I'm going to make the thing I said I was going to make, and at least do that for 3 months. And by the third month, Rainn Wilson, who played Dwight on The Office, called. And suddenly this was no longer just a, hey, that'd be a fun idea. It now became, oh, it's actually happening.
That's a wild moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And navigating that next step was all new terrain, and was scary to go from, okay, now our world is really growing, where it's not just friends and family watching these things, it's people from all over are now watching. And so I was suddenly dealing with finding my voice and also finding an audience that was finding the work. And every week I learned from that. That was my grad school in so many ways. It was making a thing every single day and instantly receiving a response from an audience that was seeing that they wouldn't just watch the thing, but then they went and did something. And that was, and still is contagious to me. We did a video where we threw a joyful parade, a surprise parade for a postal worker. And then, within a week of that video being online, there were dozens of parades across the country. And now years later, still people throwing parades. And so I realized, oh, wow, stories we tell can create the world we live in, and the things we make can make the world we live in. And what's cooler than throwing a parade? It's, hundreds of parades happening. And so that idea of an idea expanding your world and the real world around us is what I love, and why I still make things every day.
So as the Kid President videos start taking off, you're starting to spread wider, people are starting to contact you, all these things, like what are you thinking about? Where is this going? Like, where where do I go from here? I mean, you're living in Henderson, I assume, Tennessee, the small
Yeah,
town. Like,
yeah.
are you thinking
Oh no.
no,
Like,
no?
uh,
What now, right?
yeah, I mean, one of the first things to pick it up was Tosh.0, which at the time was just, mocking everything online. And they shared one of the videos I had just posted that morning, and I saw them not rip it apart, but just go like, "Oh, this is so sweet. We have nothing mean to say." And it was so like, "What? Huh?" And disarming in that way. Then when actual politicians start using this video of a pretend president, and then teachers beginning to use things in the classroom, and then, you know, it becomes a runaway train of people finding it and seeing it, and you can't control how or what context they saw it in, who presented it to them, how much of it they watched, and yet they have an opinion about it and want to share with you. And then they're saying, "Here's where I think you should go next." Like when we had the Kid President Pep Talk video was the one that most people saw first. That was maybe our 15th video since we joined Soul Pancake with Rainn Wilson, that YouTube channel. I made several, but people were like, "Oh, look at this new thing, like this. I like your video." And I'm like, "I've made like so many things." And yet they saw that and then immediately are calling, wanting my brother-in-law to be in horror movies or to like do a commercial for an energy drink. And this was a bit of the Wild West days of YouTube where we're still like, it was kind of a joke and people weren't really seeing it as a business. And I definitely didn't see it as that. And the idea of an influencer was just not at all what we were wanting this to be. Wasn't to make a child famous or to create an influencer. It was to celebrate children and to bring people together. And yet the internet was like, no, 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 this is what it is. We want it to be about this one kid, and we want it to be
We'll
about
tell
that.
you.
We would, yes. And so it was a constant going, no, 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 this is about all kids. No, 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 this is not to sell things. This is to bring people together. No, 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 no. We're not just trying to build like a platform. We're building a community, and which is a platform, but it was constantly asking, what's our compass? Where are we sailing to? I don't know. I didn't start this out. The only reason I started this because I liked being with Robbie and I wanted to make cool things. And both of those things were happening. And so to me, that was a success. Now, the icing on the cake was that it was actually impacting the world. And so that then became the third thing of impact of, oh wow, like this is meaningful to people in a way. And so I did have a moment of complete shutdown several times of, okay, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to, like, this is not, uh, this is too much. And, there was a really great group of people who scooped me up and helped me through that, including my family, Robbie's parents, a few other creators online who had been through similar things and were like, "Hey, you don't have to make anything else for the rest of your life. Just like you're fine. We will, you don't feel this pressure. I just love the love this started from. Like that's what this is about." And that was really helpful and healthy, and has kept me whole and healthy throughout the years of, not completely burning out that creative spark, that heart that this all grew from. But I would like to keep showing up and making things. The audience doesn't always show up, but I will.
It's so interesting when you talk about like that balance of a North Star and then the pressure of execution, right? Of
Yeah,
creation
yeah,
and like that tension.
yeah.
You joined us a little over a month ago for an event that we were producing in DC for nonprofit leaders. And that's the tension that we see nonprofit leaders live with
Mhm.
is North Star compassion purpose execution day to day, and like it is this incredible tension. And I'm just curious, like, as you've reflected on that evening and or um the the folks that you visited with, just like what were some of your takeaways, or what are some of the things that helped frame for you about many of these uh, very talented, exceptionally purpose-minded individuals that are working to help, make the world more humane, just, and compassionate.
Yes, yes. That's exactly who they were.
Mm.
I kind of could feel that instantly with them, even though I would see, oh, these people probably, they probably work in a much more professional, formal context than I am used to, or I don't know what we could have a conversation about. And yet it was the most beautiful experience of meeting some of the most passionate, wildly creative, brilliant people who do their work from a purposeful place, who are driven by this hope and driven by this desire to create good in the world. And I felt um, this instant connection with their struggle to have this beautiful dream and then have this day-to-day thing you have to do of showing up and all of the tangle you can get caught up in. And I got to have this conversation. It was like after the event. It was so late, like so late, talking and hearing all these stories, and it was just so clear that these people um, were tired and had faced disappointment and in different ways, and yet were still committed to that dream that started in the first place. That's still worth it. And I think for me, I left that going, oh man, I've got shipmates. Like these people are like in the battle for good every day, and they're not alone. And I've been hearing from people ever since, like just constant little notes of keep going, what you do matters. And I'm like, what do you mean? What I draw little cats and mice every day. Like, what do you mean? What I do matters? What you do is like actually, but I need to know that. And so it's really cool the work they're doing, but collectively, it's exceptionally mind-blowing what they're all doing and what it means when they come together. Like that, it's unreal.
Brad, one of my takeaways from your speech that night was this idea of don't be afraid to fail, and I think you called it a failibration, if I remember correctly. Can you unpack that a little bit for our listeners and what that means?
Yeah, so Failibration was an experiment. I wanted to throw an event and have people. Let's start. I just wanted to have an event, like throw people and have people come. I hadn't have a party and invite people, and I'd never done anything where I invited people and they bought tickets. And I thought we're renting a space. Let's do this. And so the theme became failure. I thought, well, that way, if this event doesn't go well, I succeeded in it being about failure.
It's themed
And
well.
yeah, yeah. And so I invited these really impressive people to speak, but told them they weren't allowed to talk about any success. It had to be about a fiasco, a complete, you know, disaster. I want it to be a TED talk, but terrible. And you'll get applause. It won't be recorded, so you can be vulnerable. And it was beautiful. And it spilled out into this other thing where the more I shared about this idea, it started to spread where Priya Parker, who does these writings about the art of gathering, she did a whole thing. Usually she's about, perfect events. And here's how and she did this whole thing about doing a purposefully failure of an event. And schools started doing them and nonprofits. And it was just incredible to see it spread. And I still was kind of scratching my head about, well, why does this idea of it's okay to fail? Like, I was like, I'm not celebrating mediocrity. Like, what is it that's happening here? And what it was is it's such a human thing that we need a safe place to grow and learn and help each other grow and learn, and to know it's okay. And it really came home to me that, okay, I'm going to stick with this idea. When I'm in a classroom, and I do a lot of times with classrooms, I'll do a guided drawing and I'll show like, okay, I'm going to draw a rabbit. So I'll grab, a pen, and then I'll go, okay, I'm going to draw a rabbit. And I start drawing this. And now I'm going to do an ear. And then I'll see a whole bunch of kids in the room just start slamming their fists down or crumpling the paper up immediately just because they didn't get the first circle right. And it was in one class, and a couple of kids actually were crying, and it's just the circle. And so I then shifted to go, okay, now like this guided drawing, just make a scribble, whatever you want. And that also stressed some of the kids out because they want to do it perfect. Like, what kind of scribble? How big? And then I find that 1 in 3 young people in our country wrestle with anxiety to such a degree that they like can't show up at school or in the world. 1 in 3. And that there's this really big need, this vital need for us to pop that perfection bubble, especially in school, and give them a safe place to screw up and be okay to scribble and make a mess and try and grow. And the idea is not to not fail, it's to fail better. And it works for 4th graders, and it works for people who are, in the C-suite of a company, to know, hey, we all need to share those moments of vulnerability of, I tried this and you know what? Screwed up. But here's where I'm going next. So fail better. And that also means to fail in community with people and finding that you have shipmates, you have other people. And that's part of what I loved about what it unlocks whenever I start sharing about a screw up in my own life, or, I talk about that, like that night with all of you in your community. It put everybody in this posture of, we're equals. We've all done incredible things, but we've also like done cringe-worthy, terrible things that we're not proud of. We'd rather not tell everybody, but you know what? I don't want them to repeat this mistake. Everything from fundraising to messaging to an email that was sent at the wrong time to the wrong group of people to, all sorts of mishaps that can happen. But it just brings us all to a place of learning alongside each other and working and growing alongside each other. And I want to see more of it. So yeah.
There's beauty not just in the learning, but also in what's created in the midst of that, failure, because there's still creativity in it. And
Totally, yes.
one of the things that I absolutely adore is when on your Instagram account you share some of the creative projects that kids share. Most recently, you've been around some camps, and you've shared some creative things that these campers have created that are wildly creative, like massively interesting, unique perspectives. And sometimes it's like the most simple thing, and sometimes it's a very complex thing. And lovingly, they all are odd.
Yes.
But they're all beautiful at the same time, right? And that's the same thing that, like, one of my takeaways from the conversations about failure is, like, and there's a big difference in failing and a mistake, and then you create something that doesn't seem the way that you thought it went, but you can still learn from it.
Right. Yeah, I actually this morning I was just at camp. Like, we helped run a summer camp in for 8 weeks in the summer. We're in our 3rd week right now. I was out at the craft house just before logging on with you guys, and they had a drawing competition, and the only prompt was alien. And I mean, kids immediately just like, oh, got this. The drawing. One kid from his imagination drew Alien from the movie Alien, but he's wearing a party hat, and like just like this crazy stuff that they started making, and just one simple permission to go, just do it. And there was no real reward. They said it was a competition. It was just like to do, and I am sitting there. I draw for a living. I make things like, and I was just in awe of them, like watching them go so freely, so fun, like not worrying about any sort of. And it made me want to make a cool thing too. Like I wanted to. I was jealous of that sort of freedom they had. And there's a place that we come to when we become more childlike and not childish. And I think it's very childish for us to give up when things aren't perfect. And it's childish for us to be like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to do this. Or it's childish for us to hold our gifts. And it's childlike to be open and generous. And so when I share these things that are the craft house stuff of kids making things out of toilet paper tubes and googly eyes, it's to remind myself and everybody else that, oh man, we could sure stand to be a lot more childlike.
That's beautifully said, man. And the permission to be creative is so important. So Brad, we want you to be able to get back to camp. We're so thankful for the time that you've spent with us. We're thankful for your story. We're thankful for your humanity and the kindness that you put out into the world. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. You do continue to inspire us. And so keep doing what you're doing. Keep that North Star of unlocking creativity for people, because it matters for 4-year-olds and 40-year-olds and 400-year-olds. Okay.
There are
Just so that
compliments,
you know.
and then there's compliments from people that you respect madly. And I'm so glad you guys exist. And the way you're doing what you're doing is cool, and the way you're doing it is cool. From the minute
Thank
I
you.
heard from you and we had a conversation, I was like, oh, these guys care. Like that's huge. You care about the people you're working with. You care about the impact that's being made, and you care like about what you present to them. I'm inspired that you're doing what you're doing, and so it gave me hope to know that like teams like yours exist, and may it spread far and wide, friends.
Right? And may we find more shipmates. That's
There you
what
go.
I
Totally,
want.
we've
Like,
got some cool
more
places to
shipmates.
go.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, man. Listen, we can't wait to see what happens. We can't wait to see the book celebration come out in September. And we're gonna be watching. We're gonna be watching for every craft you post, and the stories that you tell.
Thanks, friend. Thanks.